When pastors say, I don't really preach on politics, I say, in today's day and age, Eric, I say, no, you don't preach against false religion that masquerades as politics to keep the politically impotent pastors silent. Because the spirit of the age and his acolytes and the left understands that most pastors fear the label politics. They fear being associated with something perceived as political. So they know if they can redefine and masquerade their demonic, kooky, sexually obsessed assault against the image of God, children, and families as just the politics, they know they can keep a lot of those pastors silent and shut up.
Yeah.
And so they're relying on the spirit of Lot in the church rather than the spirit of Jonathan and David to say when it really mattered, when you were needed the most, to stand for the cause of what God cares about, family, children, little ones, your own freaking daughters. You give them over to the sexually obsessed, crazed mob because you wanted what? Cultural respectability, keep your place at the table, not be reviled.
And by the way, I say that, there was a time for that, right? In the book I mentioned Tim Keller. I love Tim Keller, okay? Yeah. And he was really right on this for a season.
Yeah.
But the world changed very dramatically in the last, let's say, 15 years. And when you talk about, conservatives say this, liberals say this, but the gospel says this, that mantra, that rubric, that really worked. It made sense evangelistically. But once the left adopts Marxism, transgender madness, open borders, whatever it is, you can no longer effectively say those things and be taken seriously.
Yes. Have you seen what's changed?
And a lot of people have refused to see the change.
You said that beautifully in the last episode we just did together via Skype, and so it's fun to hang out with you in person. But I would say this. I would say that these demonic ideas that you just referred to have actually been blossoming in the rotten soil of the American public for a long time.
Yeah.
And the church has failed to realize this. Chesterton once said, blessed is the man who knows not only, or happy is he who knows not only the hidden causes of things, but who has not lost touch with their beginnings. And so Charlie Kirk, our good friend in Turning Point Faith, are sponsoring this nationwide tour I'm doing right now, White Rose Resistance National Live Tour. And I'll be at this pulpit, Cedar Park Church, tomorrow morning for that tour. And so some of what I'm doing, Eric, because of men like you and others who've inspired me and educated me so well, is to expose those demonic ideas, trace the thread of these ideas through the American fabric to understand how did we get here.
Okay.
And so I think this is powerful, and I want to throw it back to you, Eric, because it's always been the same religion and agenda.
Yeah.
The deification of the self.
Right.
Margaret Sanger's first published piece was called Woman Rebel, with the tagline, no gods and no masters. I mean, come on, could it be any more blatant, church?
Well, actually, though, so if you really want to be, just to be clear here, what I said a moment ago is really only half true. In other words, when I said that Tim Keller's idea and the ideas, in other words, it was always to some extent a devil's bargain, right? Like we're gonna do this for the sake of evangelism. But if you are not someplace confronting these things, which have been weaving their way through the culture, slow march through the institutions, through the decades, then eventually it's going to come and get you. And that's kind of what happened. In other words, if you don't go against no fault divorce, if you don't go against the Johnson Amendment, if you don't, in other words, all along we have had these battles, and I think a lot of people have kind of opted out,
and had no idea,
and had no idea. But at some point, it catches up with you, and we are now.
Because things happen gradually, then suddenly.
There.
And then we go, oh, shoot.